The wind howled across Wyoming territory like a banshee's wail as Jack Morrison rode home with empty saddlebags. At 42, the Irish-American rancher felt defeat weighing on his shoulders. 3 months behind on mortgage payments, no cattle left to sell, and winter approaching fast. The drought had claimed most of his herd, leaving him struggling to survive on barren land. Thunder rumbled overhead as the first fat drops began to fall. Cresting the hill before his property, Jack spotted a dark figure sprawled motionless in the grass 200 yards from his fence line. His first instinct was to ride on. He had troubles enough. But his mother's voice echoed in memory. "Jack Morrison, you were raised better than to leave a soul suffering in God's creation." "Damn it, Ma," he muttered, turning his mare Sarah toward the fallen figure. The man was young, maybe 25, with long black hair and bronze skin, marking him as Native American. Blood matted his hair where something had struck hard, and his left arm lay at an unnatural angle. His breathing was shallow but steady. Jack looked around nervously. Relations with local tribes had been tense lately, with rumors of cattle rustling and boundary disputes. Finding an injured native on his land could bring trouble he couldn't afford. But looking down at the unconscious stranger, all Jack saw was someone who would die if left in the storm. Getting the injured man onto Sarah's back proved harder than expected. The native was solidly built, all muscle and sinew, and dead weight. Besides, Jack's back protested as he lifted and pushed, the rain making everything slippery. By the time he had the man secured across the saddle, both were soaked through. The ride to the cabin took forever, Jack walking alongside Sarah to steady his unconscious passenger. The storm unleashed its full fury, turning dry earth to mud and familiar landscape into a gray, violent world. When they finally reached the cabin, Jack was exhausted. Getting the injured man inside required another struggle, but eventually he had him laid out on the narrow bed that served as both couch and sleeping place. The cabin's single room felt smaller with another occupant, but the warmth from the banked fire was welcoming. Jack lit the oil lamp and got his first good look at his unexpected guest. The head wound was serious but not fatal. He'd seen worse during his brief stint as a cavalry medic 15 years ago. The broken arm would need setting, though. As Jack cleaned the blood from the wound, the injured man's eyes fluttered open. They were dark brown, almost black, and for a moment filled with confusion and fear. He tried to sit up, wincing as movement sent pain through his arm. "Easy there," Jack said, placing a gentle hand on the man's shoulder. "You took a bad knock to the head." The native's eyes darted around the cabin, taking in his surroundings. When they settled back on Jack, there was wariness but not hostility. "You helped me," he said in accented but clear English. "Storm was coming," Jack replied simply. "Nobody deserves to die in the mud." The man tried to move his injured arm and gasped, "It's broken." "Yeah, I can set it for you, but it's going to hurt like hell. You got a name?" "Thomas," the man said after a moment's hesitation. "Thomas Walking Bear. Jack Morrison. This is my place." Jack moved to his small supply of medical materials, remnants from his army days. "That head wound needs cleaning too. You remember what happened?" Thomas closed his eyes, concentrating. "Horse threw me. Lightning spooked her near the creek. Must have hit my head on a rock when I fell." He looked at Jack with something approaching respect. "Most white men would have left me there." "Most men never had my mother," Jack replied, preparing a clean cloth. "She'd have tanned my hide for leaving anyone to die, Indian or otherwise." As Jack worked on the wounds, Thomas endured the pain in silence. The arm setting was the worst part. Jack had to pull hard to get the bones aligned, and Thomas's face went gray with the effort of not crying out. But when it was done and splinted with strips of wood and cloth, he nodded his thanks. "You have skill with healing," Thomas said. "Picked up a few things in the war, nothing fancy." Jack offered him a cup of water and some hard bread. "You hungry?" As Thomas ate, the storm continued to rage outside. The cabin felt like a small island of warmth and safety in a hostile world. Jack found himself studying his guest. The man's bearing, the way he held himself even while injured, spoke of pride and strength. There was intelligence in his eyes, and something else Jack couldn't quite place. The storm showed no signs of letting up as evening wore on. Jack had rigged a comfortable sleeping arrangement for Thomas on the bed while he prepared to spend the night in his father's old chair by the fire. The cabin creaked and groaned under the wind's assault, but the solid log construction held firm. "Your ranch," Thomas said eventually, breaking the comfortable silence. "It struggles." Jack stiffened. "What makes you say that?" "The empty fields, the thin horses, the way you look at the land like it's failing you." Thomas's voice held no judgment. "Mine does the same to me sometimes. You're a rancher? My people have cattle now. Government says we must live like white men or starve." There was bitterness in Thomas's voice. "But the land is hard to understand when you're not born to it." Jack felt an unexpected kinship with this stranger. "Been fighting this place for 3 years since my father died. Some days I think it's winning, and other days..." Jack looked out the window at the storm. "Other days I remember why he came here, why he thought this was worth dying for." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the rain on the roof and the wind in the eaves. Jack found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in months. There was something about Thomas's presence that was calming, reassuring. "This drought," Jack said eventually. "It's been hard on everyone. White Indian doesn't matter. The land doesn't pick favorites when it comes to suffering." Thomas shifted carefully on the bed, favoring his injured arm. "My grandfather used to say that the earth speaks to those who listen. But sometimes what it says is hard to hear. What's it telling you now?" "That change is coming. Big change." Thomas's eyes reflected the firelight. "The old ways and the new ways. They're going to have to find a way to live together, or neither will survive." Jack considered this as he added another log to the fire. "My father came here from Ireland during the potato famine. Said America was the land where a man could make something of himself if he was willing to work hard enough." He laughed bitterly. "Didn't mention that the land might not cooperate." "Your father was a wise man to leave a place of suffering," Thomas said. "My people had no choice but to stay and adapt." Both took courage. "Did they?" "Sometimes I wonder if staying and fighting isn't just another form of giving up." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "I have a wife," he said finally. "Sarah, like your horse." A small smile crossed his face. "She's with child, our first." Jack looked up from the fire. "Congratulations." "She worries about the world we're bringing this child into. About whether there will be a place for our people in the future." Thomas's voice grew soft. "I tell her that as long as there are good people in the world, there's hope. Tonight, I know I was right." The simple statement hit Jack harder than he expected. When was the last time someone had called him a good person? When was the last time he'd felt like one? "You don't know me well enough to say that," Jack said. "I know enough. You could have left me to die. It would have been easier, safer, but you didn't." Thomas met his eyes across the flickering firelight. "In my culture, when someone saves your life, it creates a bond. You become responsible for each other." "I'm not looking for responsibility," Jack said quickly. "I can barely handle my own problems. Sometimes that's when we need each other most." Jack stood and walked to the window, looking out into the storm-tossed night. "The bank's going to take this place. 3 months behind on payments, and I don't see any way to catch up. Come spring, I'll probably be looking for work in town, or maybe heading further west." "You would leave your father's dream? Dreams don't pay debts." Thomas struggled to sit up straighter. "My people have a saying, the tree that bends in the storm survives, but the one that breaks was already rotten inside. What's that supposed to mean? Maybe your father's dream isn't dying. Maybe it's just changing into something you don't recognize yet. Jack turned back to face him. You talk like a preacher. My grandfather was a medicine man. Words were part of his healing, too. Thomas paused. What would you do if you could save the ranch? I don't know anymore. Used to be I had big plans. Expand the herd, maybe find a wife, build something that would last. Jack slumped back into his chair. Now I just try to get through each day. That's not living. That's just not dying. The words stung because they were true. Jack had been so focused on surviving that he'd forgotten what he was surviving for. As Thomas's breathing evened out into sleep, Jack remained awake, tending the fire and thinking about the day's events. He'd started the morning as a broke, bitter man facing the loss of everything he'd worked for. Now sitting in the warm glow of the fire with an unlikely companion, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months, a sense of connection to something larger than his own problems. The storm continued to pass overhead, but its fury was spent. By morning, Jack thought, the world would look different. Washed clean and full of possibility. Jack woke before sunrise, his neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. The storm had passed in the night, leaving behind a hushed world that seemed to hold its breath. Through the window, he could see the first pale light of dawn beginning to paint the eastern sky. Thomas was still asleep, his breathing steady and deep. The swelling around his head wound had gone down some, which Jack took as a good sign. He moved quietly to the stove and started coffee, the familiar ritual helping to clear his head. As the coffee percolated, Jack stepped outside to assess the damage from the storm. The rain had been a blessing and a curse his land desperately needed the moisture, but it had also washed out part of his fence and left his small vegetable garden looking beaten down. Still, the air smelled clean and fresh, and he could see green shoots already pushing up through the mud. The land recovers quickly. Thomas's voice came from the doorway. Jack turned to find his guest standing there, cradling his splinted arm, but looking much better than the night before. You should be resting. I've rested enough. Besides, I wanted to see your land in the daylight. Thomas stepped carefully down from the porch, his eyes sweeping across the modest ranch. It's good land, hard but good. Before Thomas could say more, they both heard it, the sound of approaching horses. Not the hurried gallop of trouble, but the steady, measured pace of a group moving with purpose. Jack's hand instinctively moved to the rifle he'd brought outside, but Thomas placed his good hand on his arm. Wait, Thomas said quietly. Listen. Jack strained his ears and heard something that made his blood run cold, singing. Low, rhythmic chanting that seemed to come from multiple voices. It was unlike anything he'd ever heard, both beautiful and ominous. What is that? Jack whispered. My people, Thomas said simply. They've come looking for me. The singing grew louder, and Jack could see them now, riders emerging from the morning mist like ghosts materializing from the spirit world. There were more than he'd expected, maybe 20 or 30, from what looked like different tribes based on their varied dress and markings. They rode in a loose circle around his property, not threatening but not exactly comforting either. They won't hurt you, Thomas said firmly. You're under my protection now, just as I was under yours. The lead rider was an older man with silver-streaked hair and a face that looked carved from weathered stone. He rode with the easy confidence of someone born to the saddle, and when he saw Thomas, his stoic expression cracked into a smile of relief. White Fox, the elder called out in heavily accented English. Your woman has been crying rivers. I'm sorry, grandfather, Thomas replied. The storm caught me far from home. The elder's eyes shifted to Jack, taking in his stance, his weapon, his obvious nervousness. And this is the white man who carried you to safety. This is Jack Morrison. He saved my life and asked for nothing in return. The old man dismounted with surprising grace for his age and approached Jack directly. Up close, Jack could see that his eyes were a startling pale blue mixed blood, then, which explained his excellent English. "I am Joseph Ironheart," the man said, extending his hand. "Thomas Walking Bear is my grandson's son. His life has value to many people." Jack shook the offered hand, surprised by the firm grip and the directness of the man's gaze. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Joseph said firmly. "What you did was what a man of honor does. There is a difference." A young woman pushed through the crowd on horseback, her long black hair braided with small shells and beads. Even from a distance, Jack could see the worry in her face and the swell of her belly beneath her dress. When she saw Thomas, she slid from her horse with surprising agility and ran to him. "Thomas!" she cried, throwing her arms around him before remembering his injuries. "I thought ... when Star came back alone ... I'm alive, Sarah, thanks to this man." Thomas gestured to Jack with his good arm. "Jack Morrison, meet my wife Sarah. Walking Bear." Sarah turned to Jack, and he was struck by her youth and beauty. She couldn't have been more than 20, with intelligent dark eyes and a presence that commanded attention. "You saved my husband," she said simply. "How do I thank you for that?" "No thanks needed," Jack replied, feeling awkward under the scrutiny of so many eyes. "I'm just glad he's all right." Joseph Ironheart stepped forward again. "Among our people, a life debt is not dismissed so easily. You have done us great honor, and honor must be repaid." "I don't need payment," Jack said quickly. "Really." "What do you need?" Sarah asked, studying his face with unsettling intensity. Jack looked around at the circle of faces, all watching him expectantly. These people had ridden through the night and the storm to find one of their own, and now they were offering to help him. It was more human kindness than he'd experienced in months. Jack started, then stopped. What did he need? Money, yes. But that wasn't something they could give him. Time, but that was his to manage. Then he looked at his damaged fence, his small struggling ranch, his isolation. "I need help," he said quietly. "Not charity, but help. I'm trying to save this place, and I don't think I can do it alone." Joseph smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Now you speak truth. Alone, we are all weak. Together, we can be strong." The elder raised his voice, speaking in his native language to the assembled group. Jack couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the tone formal, ceremonial, important. Several of the riders nodded and spoke in agreement. "What did you tell them?" Jack asked. "I told them that you are now part of our extended family," Joseph replied. "That your troubles are our troubles, and your success is our success. It is decided." Jack felt overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept our help," Thomas said, moving to stand beside his wife. "Say you'll let us prove that different peoples can work together." Looking around at the faces surrounding him, young and old, male and female, all united in their offer of assistance, Jack felt something shift inside his chest. The isolation and bitterness that had been growing like a cancer began to crack and crumble. "Yes," he said simply, "I accept." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Several of the younger men dismounted and began examining the damaged fence, talking rapidly among themselves in their native tongue. Women started unpacking supplies from their horses. Children ran around the property, exploring with the fearless curiosity of youth. As the morning progressed, Jack watched in amazement as his small ranch was transformed into a hive of activity. The damaged fence was not just repaired, but reinforced and extended. His vegetable garden was replanted with seeds the women had brought. Men worked on his roof, fixing leaks he hadn't even known existed. But more than the physical labor, Jack found himself part of something he'd never experienced before: a community. People who worked not for wages but for the simple satisfaction of helping someone who had helped them. By noon, the transformation seemed miraculous. Thomas approached him as the work was winding down, his arm in a proper sling now thanks to the attention of the tribal medicine woman. "It's going to be hard," Thomas said quietly. "There will be people who don't understand what we're trying to do." "What exactly are we trying to do?" Jack asked. "Build something new. A place where different peoples can work together, learn from each other." Thomas looked out at the bustling activity. "My wife is pregnant. I want my child to grow up in a world where the color of someone's skin doesn't determine whether they're welcome." One of the children, a boy of maybe 8, came running up to Jack with a handful of wildflowers he'd picked from the restored garden. "For you," the boy said shyly, offering the flowers. "Grandfather says you're family now." Jack accepted the flowers, feeling his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. When was the last time someone had given him flowers? When was the last time anyone had called him family? As the various groups began to pack up and prepare for the journey back to their homes, there was no sadness. Instead, there was anticipation, excitement about what was to come. Thomas was among the last to leave. As he mounted his horse with some difficulty, Jack called out to him, "Thomas, that saying your grandfather had about the tree that bends in the storm. Yes, I think I understand it now. The tree doesn't just survive because it bends. It survives because it has deep roots and strong branches to hold on to." Thomas smiled, "And now you have both." As the last of the riders disappeared into the gathering dusk, Jack remained on his porch, the child's wildflowers still in his hand. The ranch was quiet now, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not the silence of isolation, but the peaceful quiet of a place waiting for new life to begin. He thought about his father, who had dreamed of building something lasting in this hard land. Perhaps this wasn't what the older Morrison had envisioned, but Jack suspected he would have approved. After all, wasn't America supposed to be the place where different peoples came together to build something new? As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Jack Morrison, struggling rancher turned community builder, went inside his cabin to plan for a future he had never dared to imagine. Outside, the wind whispered through the new fence posts, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. The circle was complete, but the story was just beginning.